Howdy folks, this is Nathan Rourke. Today we have a wonderful opportunity to talk about wetwood fires. It has been raining for the last couple days, and it has rained actually 1.5 inches in the last couple hours today. So I thought that we ought to seize this moment and talk about making fire with wet wood. So when you're talking about wetwood fires, there's a lot of things that you have to consider. And there's a lot of variables that you can kind of put into play here. But ideally, you want to gather the driest possible material you can find and make it work. I know that's a big statement, so let's talk about where to find that driest possible material. Some of my favorite places are underneath rock overhangs, underneath fallen trees. All right, so those are some of the places I'll go to first. But as always the case, you're going to run into situations where you can't find those things, and so you need to create your own material. Now I have my favorite fire making materials in my home in the mountains here, and today all of those favorite materials, like the lower branches of our evergreens, our hemlocks, our white pines, our birches, they're all saturated, and to try to start a one-match fire with those materials would fail. So I need to dive deeper today, and I need to go inside a piece of wood to find the driest material. So what I'm going to talk to you about is how to do that, what to look for, and we're going to build a fire from a log, essentially. So in order to do this today, you're going to need a couple tools, and you're going to need to consider these tools in your survival kit as you're going out in the woods. Basically, it's a good knife. We're going to be doing a technique called batoning, which is going to be stressful on a knife blade, and if your knife isn't up to the task, you could end up breaking your knife, and a broken knife in the backcountry is a bad situation. So basically when you have a folding knife, here's a folder, small combat folder. When you have a folding knife, you have a steel pin that holds that blade to the handle. When I baton, when I'm putting a lot of force on the back side, on the spine of my blade, that pin can be jeopardized, and I've seen more than one knife fail and break as a result of batoning. So what we're looking at then is sheath knives. And when we're looking at sheath knives, I'm a big fan of sheath knives that have a full tang. So I want steel that's going all the way through the handle. Another knife that I'm always carrying with me in the backwoods is a simple Swedish Mora high carbon steel blade. This also is a full tang. It's not a full width handle tang, it's a rat tail tang. So I have a piece of metal going all the way through the handle. It's not the full thickness of the handle, but nonetheless, I put these knives through a lot of trial, and I have yet to break one. So as I was walking up here today after the rain let up, I was gathering material. In order to keep this as real for you, I wanted to just gather things as I came up through the woods in the saturated forest. I picked up a piece of poplar, about 2.5 inches in diameter. I stripped the soaking wet bark off the outside to take a lot of the moisture off the outside. But what I want out of this piece of poplar is the inside of this log. As the rain pounded down on this today and yesterday and the day before, the wood began to saturate, but it only saturated, looks like maybe 1/2 inch deep. The other thing, as I picked up this piece of poplar, I was looking for a piece of poplar that was not laying on the ground. It was caught up leaning in a tree. When things fall on the ground, the wet ground, they immediately start absorbing moisture. And so anytime you can in a wetwood fire situation, gather your materials from suspended in the air or leaning up against another tree or a rock where you have air around your wood, not wet soil and leaves around your wood. You're going to have a drier piece of material. So poplar, relatively soft wood. I liked soft woods for this technique because they split out easier. Soft woods are less dense, they burn hotter, they burn faster, which is what I want to start this fire. And then I wanted a piece of wood that had relatively a good bit of straight grain. Ideally, the wood that you grab is not going to be so rotten, so far decomposed that it doesn't have integrity enough to split well. We're going to see how this poplar does. I can tell you right now, it looks like it's a little bit on the rotten side, a little more rotten than I would like, but we're going to make it work. All right, so the idea here is you take your piece of wood that you're going to baton, you take your knife, and you place it in the middle of your piece of wood. Now, wood likes to split with equal opposition of force, so I want to try to get my knife as close to the middle line of this wood as I possibly can. That will ensure or give me a better chance of a good even split all the way down. I also am looking for a piece of wood with a decently straight grain, minimal knots to make my split go off center line or try to break out on me. And then I grabbed a baton. A baton is another piece of wood. I did pick a harder piece of wood, a piece of dogwood. Don't have to, but harder woods make better batons. So if you know your woods and you know how to do this, go for it. I would never use another piece of metal or a rock on the back of my knife. That's knife abuse in my book, and it's taken a very valuable tool and put it in jeopardy. I'm going to use a piece of wood, so this piece of dogwood is my ticket here. So I'm going to start tapping. Driving down on the spine of my knife, driving my knife into the wood, and now I'm going to move my tapping more towards the point of my blade, and I'm going to try to split this all the way down, or as down as I can. We didn't get all the way down. That rot did play out on me, but that's all right. Things are looking pretty good. I got a good dry center. That's what I'm after. So I'm going to baton again. I'm going for a quartering technique. Now, batoning is also a really safe technique. Notice that my hands are not under my blade. You know, notice that my hands are completely free of the danger zone as I'm batoning. So now that I've exposed the inside corner, you all see this is the very middle of this 2.5-inch piece of poplar. This is the driest possible material I have. And that's what I'm after to create my fire today. So I'm gonna gather my raincoat, because when everything's wet on the ground, I mentioned before, but if I start shaving shavings onto the wet ground, those shavings are immediately gonna start soaking up moisture. So I'm gonna use my raincoat, I'm gonna open it up, and I'm gonna start carving. Now I'm gonna get some nice, thin shavings, holding my knife relatively at a low angle to get some nice thin shavings, and I'm going to shoot these shavings into my coat. I don't really want to slice my raincoat, so I'm actually using a technique where I'm pulling my left hand back rather than pushing my right hand forward. That way my knife is not actually driving forward where it can slice my raincoat, but the wood is getting pulled back towards me against my knife. I'm going to switch up knives just to show you what a thinner bladed Mora looks like working this same technique. All right, so I'm going for that inside corner, going the path of least resistance. You know, corners are the path of least resistance when you're carving. Getting these nice long curly Q shavings. This is my material to start my fire today. And now I think that's enough for us to get going today. We're going to construct the fire, which is our next step. And it isn't as easy as piling these shavings up and lighting them with a match. We're going to build a little raft to pile the shavings onto. So I'm going to take some of these dry pieces of wood, relatively dry, that I batoned out, dry side up. I'm going to place them down in my quick fire pit here. I'm going to grab some cross pieces. On the way up, I grabbed some hemlock branches off of trees. I'm going to take some of these thinner hemlock branches. Now, you all probably know that the lower branches of evergreens will naturally die. In this situation today, I'm gathering these hemlocks. Even though they're saturated and wet, they are up off the ground, surrounded by air because they're still attached to the lower reaches of that tree. And I'm just making a small raft, a small structure, so to speak, to create airflow underneath my fire in this wetwood fire, to keep my valuable materials up off the damp ground. And now I'm going to carefully start setting the shavings on top of this raft. Okay? So it's not just a matter of just piling them on. There is a method to this madness. I want to set them so that I got edges exposed to flame, so that I got plenty of oxygen between shavings, so that the shavings aren't going to choke each other out. Again, I'm going to clear out my entryway here where the match is going to go. Now y'all, just a quick side note. The match is not my preferred backwoods method of starting fire. However, I do feel that instructionally the match teaches us a lot. And if we can get good at making one match fires in all kinds of different situations, then when it comes to using other techniques of creating fire, we got it. The other thing I want you to know is I have some wet, saturated wet hemlock ready to go on top of these shavings. Now that's also sitting on top of my raincoat for the very same reason. No need to get it wetter by putting it on the wet ground. but it's going to be ready. You see how fine these sticks are? They are saturated because of all the rain, but I'm banking on the heat coming from my shavings to be hot enough to dry out my hemlock, and then my fire will build. One of the keys of a good wetwood fire is lots and lots and lots of little stuff, because you have to imagine the heat from my fire has to dry out the wood before the wood can combust. Okay, I'm going to tilt it down, I'm going to roll it, I'm going to shelter it, make sure the wood is going, looking good. Carefully, I'm going to get it underneath here. I'm going to hold my match in one place, underneath these shavings. I'm not lighting my fire in 10 different places. I want my fire going in one spot. You can see this smoke coming off of our fire. That's a sign that we got some wetness still in there, some good damp stuff going on. Look at this dark smoke coming off of our shavings. So we're gonna hope for the best. Looks like we got fire trying to climb. I'm gonna gently add some shavings, making sure that the fire has plenty of food as it's climbing up. Another thing I want to do is I'm going to get this stuff in close to the fire now, because I want the heat to start drying it out. A little bit more shavings, nice and gingerly. I got to baby this, y'all. I can easily put this fire out at this point. And now, some hemlock. You can see the color of the smoke change. A dark smoke is indicative of moisture. But I need that heat to start drying this hemlock out. And now you'll see as it keeps climbing, our heat gets bigger and bigger. You need to stay ahead of the fire. So you need to have wood on the fire drying out at all times, or wood around the fire drying out at all times. This fire, the heat that it's putting off, is crucial in your wetwood survival situation. So if I'm slacking, then I lose it. So I need to always have wood on or around my fire pre-drying before it actually gets put on the fire, so that it will combust more readily when it's time for it to combust. And there you have it, folks. Another tool for your toolbox, wetwood fires. Because it always seems that when you need fire the most, there's always a wet situation around. You got hypothermia, you got river swims, you got giant rainstorms coming in. So learning how to make a wetwood fire and getting intimate with this process could very well save your life. So these videos are great lessons. I enjoy sharing them with you, but they'll do you no good unless you practice. So always remember this, that failure to train is training to fail. So get out there and practice your wetwood fires. Thanks, and y'all take care.